panel on the writing publish. Oh my gosh. This is a great way to start. Welcome to our panel on the writing process from start to finish. This is my last panel of the day, and as you can tell, I am a little bit overexcited about it. I'm having a complete blast, and I'm very excited for this panel, which is the Southern Hemisphere takes control of IcarusCon. So we have Kevin Clare here from Sydney. Is that right? We have
Yes.
We have Anne from Lower Hutt, New Zealand. Anne and I are representing New Zealand. And we have Gary and St John and Nigel when he joins us, representing wider Australia. So this is a really exciting lineup for me because we see so few Australasian authors out there in the media. So our first question, I'm just going to get everyone to introduce themselves briefly, starting with Kevin.
Okay, my name is Kevin Clare. Oh, hi, Nigel. My name is Kevin Clare. I have one dystopian novel. I have 2 romance novellas, and I have a lot of like urban fantasy, magic realism books out. And I'm published through 9 Star Press. And yeah, check my stuff out. I live in Sydney. I'm married. Been with my partner or husband for 30 years now, and yeah, have no pets, no kids, and love life. And drinking pina coladas.
And Kevin also has very noisy birds who live outside his apartment, and your apartment is called Sabrina. Is that right?
That's right. Our apartment is called Sabrina. I have a gramophone called Edgar, and our car is called Dorian because it's grey.
Almost forgot to unmute myself. Okay, I'm going to throw it over to St John. St John, where in the world are you now?
Originally from Sydney, but I'm currently living in New Orleans. So yeah, I've found myself flung onto a foreign shore. I was living in San Francisco, but I decided to move to New Orleans because San Francisco is slightly too prone to natural disasters. We'll be underwater in about 5 years, but not quite yet. But yes, I'm the author of Quake City, a gay comedy horror novel available from fine bookstores everywhere.
Very cool. New Orleans is one of those places that's on my to-do list. Gary, I can see Darth Vader in your background. I think I know a few of your favorite franchises.
Yeah, I love Star Wars. I'm not overly obsessed with it, but I was given this as a gift, so there it is. My name's Gary Lunsborough. I'm the author of The Boy from the Mish, which is a young adult novel published by Allen and Unwin in February this year. Just been doing a lot of these sort of things, so I think I'm pretty used to it by now.
I'm sorry. Having asked everybody to mute themselves, I keep forgetting to unmute myself. So let's lead on with our next Australian. Hello, Nigel. It's awesome to have you here.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Hi. Yeah, I'm Nigel Bartlett. I live in Sydney. I'm from England originally, but I've lived in Australia for 25 years now. I'm a crime author. My first book, King of the Road, was published, trying to turn it the right way, published by, camera does the opposite thing to what you want it to do. It was published by Penguin Random House in 2015. And I'm currently working on my second book, quite slowly, but yeah, getting towards the end of that now. I live with 2 cats called Marcus and Will, and my partner Armando, who's downstairs on the sofa because we haven't been up very long this morning on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, what time is it in Sydney?
It's 10 o'clock actually. It's yeah, we had a bit of a late morning this morning, so it was a bit of a scrabble for me to get myself ready.
Yeah, I can relate. And Anne, introduce yourself.
Right, I'm Anne, so I'm in Lower Hutt, New Zealand. Yeah, I'm actually half Australian, so I can sort of say I'm tipping my foot in New Zealand and Australia. So I've been published for about 10 years, but I've had rights back from the book, so I'm busy republishing. So I still try and get the backlist back out. So at the moment, I have 6 indie published books out. So, and there's a mix of urban fantasy, contemporary, and historical. So I mix a few genres around. So I share my house with my cat, Kaylee, who's asleep on the bed. Hopefully she'll behave herself through this because she's quite demanding, as Gillian knows, having met her. I've got 3 kids and 6 grandchildren. Yeah, and I'm also a musician. So I used to be a music teacher. I now work in a public library, and I also play violin in a local orchestra.
So yeah, Anne has many strings to her bow. So Anne mentioned that she has, she's been publishing for years now. One of the reasons I was so excited to do this panel is that we have got a really diverse range of writing experience represented here. We've got people at the start of their journey, people who have been doing this for a while, people who actually, I think we're probably all on the journey. It doesn't matter how long you've been publishing, how many books you've got out, there is still so much to learn. So I'm going to hop into our first question. How long have you been writing and how has your process changed? And actually, I'm going to be mean and I'm going to start with Anne.
Oh, okay. So I've been writing for years. I started way back in school and then rediscovered it when my kids were at primary school, and started in on fanfic, which is where Gillian and I met. And then I decided, I'd like to write a full-length novel. So I wrote my first book when I was doing my conjoint BA Bachelor of Teaching degree in my downtime, which, yeah, crazy, I know. And then got it published a couple of years later. So I'm not a fast writer because I work full time and I have other commitments and stuff going on as well. So probably average about a couple of books a year. At the moment, I'm putting out a lot more because of repubbing and stuff like that. So what was the rest of the question? Sorry, my brain's a bit fried today.
That is fair enough. The rest of the question is, how has your writing process changed, if it has changed?
I think I used to plot a lot more heavier, but now as I've gone along, I still go through when I start a book and pull up points for the main things that want to happen in the story. That's usually the beginning, a bit about the characters, the main plot points, and kind of the ending. But as I've gone along, I think I've gone more sort of pantsing, I suppose you'd call it. It's not quite as far as pantsing. So I'm sort of working out what I'm writing in the chapter ahead of the chapter. And I have things like, oh yes, this is going to happen, and then the characters come along and 3 chapters detour, or a character turns up who wasn't in the outline and ends up becoming a really important character in the book and sometimes even gets his own book. So yeah, that's my process. except for some things need to be plotted a little bit more in detail, like historicals, because you've got to make sure that you get the historical things matching with what you're going to happen. Like, you can't have someone wandering through World War II and you're saying, oh, there's bombs coming down and they weren't in the area. Or sometimes you can use what happened to actually further to work in with the plot as well. So that one's a little bit more complicated. And also I've co-written some books with my friend Lou Silver, and we've had to be a lot more detailed with that, so we both know where we're going. And I've also co-written a series called a paranormal romance series called The Sleepless City with Elizabeth Noble. So we had to sit down, even though we didn't co-write the books, and work out where we were going so we could foreshadow what's happening and stuff like that. And even now we're doing spin-offs in the same shared world, but we're still having to make sure that we've got the continuity right and the world building doesn't contradict and stuff like that. So there's a bit of plotting and a bit of pantsing and a bit of in between going on.
Yeah, that sounds like a very flexible approach. So let's see, I think, Kevin, you've probably, after Anne, been publishing or writing longest. Would I be right in that?
Look, probably. I started writing my first novel, Drama Queens with Love Scenes, probably at some stage in the 90s, and ran it past an assessor and it got first published in 2012. Actually, she should have brought the other. They're on the bookshelf over there, the other versions of it. And I was just happy that a publisher gave me, that didn't have the enjoyment of sending me a rejection letter, actually wanted to publish it. So that came out in 2012 through a publisher that it's no longer with. And the second publisher it's with is no longer with us anyway. So it's now through 9 Star. Now, how my writing has changed over time. When Drama Queens with Love Scenes actually came out, when I was reading the reviews, one thing I noticed is that although people loved the book, some of them made reference to they kind of weren't into it, but they're glad they stuck with it because they really started to enjoy it. And while that was like a compliment in a way, I knew I better get my plotting right. So I became a serious plotter after that, and especially the sequel. See, why not show them? Drama Queens and Adult Themes is actually told from 4 points of view. So I had to really carefully think about my plotting to make sure each character moved the story forward. They weren't repeating themselves. They were actually moving the story forward because all 4 of them don't know the whole story. But by the time I wrote my first dystopian, Social Media Central, I was in... dystopian was something I wasn't comfortable with. So I found myself second-guessing a lot, and that's when I started panstering a bit. One of the minor characters decided she was going to become a major character. And but one thing I always do with my writing, though, is I always know my ending. And at one stage, another character wanted to be a major character, but that would have stuffed up my ending. And I wanted to stick to my ending because I liked the ending. And one thing I like about that, even that process, is when you know your ending so strongly, you can throw in red herrings. The other part of my process, which I actually got from a successful author, a workshop I did with her, after I finish a draft of a book, I'll put it away for 3 months. I'll then go to one of my other works in progress, print it out in a font I've never seen it in, have a red pen in hand, or these days make a PDF in a font I've never seen it in, and have my tablet and my electronic pen in hand, go through and get rid of stuff like my Yoda-isms, scenes that need more development, characters that are under development, things that are just badly written, I put in write better. And then I work through that process with the next draft, and then that goes away for a few months while I go back to one of my other whips. And when I finally get to a point where I'm hardly making any changes to a book, I know it's ready to submit to a publisher. So that's my process. And so I'm a bit more of a hybrid plotter pantser now, because I trust myself with it. But I always work towards the ending, knowing my ending, my strong ending.
What really interests me about, oh, hang on, can we mute you, Kevin? Sorry.
Oh,
Okay, so what really interests me about what Anne and Kevin have said is that they've both sort of gone from very loosely plotting to plotting more, or hybrid plotting and pantsing, but it sounds to me as though it's not sort of a natural evolution as you write more to go from not plotting to plotting more, but it sounds to me like this change was driven by the books themselves, the needs of the book. So right now I'm really excited to hear from St. John, Gary and Nigel, who I think you've only got one book out each, is that right? And you're so what my
I
question
have
for
three,
you,
but
oh, St.
only
John,
one recent one.
the newer next, okay. What is your writing process? What does that look like?
I mean, a standard day's writing is wake up in the morning, go to work, finish exhausted, drink wine, weep uncontrollably, and then the next morning complain to my boyfriend that I never get anything done. So, like Anne said, when you have a full-time job, finding the time to dedicate to it is brutal sometimes, and you have to wait until you have the energy, or else force yourself to do it. But in terms of planning things, I'm very much a pantser. My brain just can't think ahead in that much detail. I can't do it. I don't find it interesting or engaging. And if I'm bored by what I'm working on, then I think I have no right to expect anyone else to be interested by it. So what I'll do is I'll start with, I'll have a broad idea, and I'll start with chapter 1 and start populating it with characters and just let them bounce off each other, because I think you get a more organic, characterization, you get more organic plotting. You don't get, it does deprive you of certain things that plotting does if you can plot it all out in advance. I know authors who just have extraordinary timing, and their writing is very compelling and suspenseful and tense. But it deprives you of any spontaneity as well. I'm the other way around. I think I've got a lot of spontaneity. Everything's very engaging in the moment. But the structure of mine is maybe a little bit looser. I also had to laugh a little bit because Kevin and Anne said they both try and plot in a lot of detail, particularly when it comes to anything historical. And I'm the exact opposite way. If I'm writing something in the past, and my first two novels do. My first is Radium Baby, which is set in the 1920s. My second is Skunk's Dance, which is set partially in the Old West. I make it a point of not doing any research whatsoever into those time periods, because what I write has kind of a heightened reality, and I'm not really interested in what actually the Old West was like. What I'm interested in is spaghetti westerns and setting something in that, fictional world where everything is ridiculous and over the top. That's where the fun of it is for me.
Yeah, I think you've made a lot of good points there about whatever, when you're writing, it has to be fun, most of all. So, Gary and Nigel, what have you learned in writing your novels, and sort of what will you do, or would you like to do differently the next time? I'm going to choose Gary to answer first.
Yeah, firstly, sorry, I think my internet's a bit unstable, so I might drop out a little bit. So yeah, I'm very much a pantser as well. Yeah, I really love that, that feeling of discovery when I'm writing. And yeah, like I said before, I do get a bit if I start to plan things too much, yeah, I start to lose a bit of interest, or I just, I feel like I've spoiled that discovery for myself. Uh, but yeah, I found in writing The Boy from the Mish, that first sort of draft, I guess, was very much just about the central love story. There weren't any subplots, and a lot of the side characters weren't really developed, so that all came later in the editing. So yeah, I guess, I had to build a lot of stuff through the edit, so I gave a couple side characters more development, and yeah, there were all these other moments that I had to bring to life, because there were really small elements of those there, but they weren't explored, just because I wasn't interested in exploring that at the time. But yeah, I think moving forward, I definitely like to at least write a few notes about what I'm about to do. I've definitely, I've written other manuscripts since the book's been published, and I definitely, took a more, uh, I was looking at it more as a whole story, so I was thinking of the subplots and these other characters that I'm going to develop, and wanting to make sure those side characters have a good arc as well. And yeah, I guess so. I guess I'm sort of very minimally moving towards, uh, that little bridge between plotting and pantsing. But yeah, at this stage, I would say I'm definitely a pantser. Uh, but it does help, I think, with the other project I've worked on, to have a bit of a sense of the structure and the other arcs I want to explore.
That sounds very cool. And the bridge between plotting and pantsing is a very nice place to hang out.
I
So-
love what Gary said about not wanting to spoil the ending for yourself, by the way. I completely agree with that. I don't know where it's going to end. I don't know who the characters are. And being surprised by them is, being led by them and finding out things as you go is a really great joy. And it's a good sign that your book is in the right place as well. If it leads you, it means it's evolving naturally. It means it has its own life.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, I don't feel like I've properly got the grip of a story until the characters do something unexpected and it veers off somewhere away from my beautifully plotted outline. So yeah, I am totally here for that. Nigel, lucky last.
Hi, yeah. So I've actually been, although I wasn't published till 2015, I've been writing for quite a long time before that. I started in around late 90s, I think, and the first manuscript was really not publishable, and but it was my practice manuscript, and it was a bit of a embarrassing autobiographical story, I suppose. And the first novel that did get published, King of the Road, so that evolved. It started off, I thought I was going to write just a literary drama, about a family drama about a guy who's looking after his nephew, a gay guy looking after his nephew, and the nephew goes missing. And I thought it would just be about how that affects his relationship with his own family, with the parents of the kids, with his own parents, with his, and how it impacts all their family relationships. And I wrote this 150,000 word first draft, but halfway through that first draft, someone said to me, "Look, Nigel, this should really be a crime story." And I didn't really read crime or anything in those days. So it did veer down crime territory in that first draft. But then when I went to the second draft, that's when I did plot it out. I sat down and plotted it out quite heavily. And threw out probably half of that 150,000 words. Basically started all over again, and had a clear structure for it, and had this folder of scenes bound together. And it wasn't like a sort of James Patterson 150,000 word outline. It was just like a scene page for each scene. And the story did veer from that, but I loved writing to that outline because I'm quite an anxious writer. you know, I love the being in the writing, but as soon as I get to the end of the scene, if I don't know what the next, if I get to a point where it's like I don't know what's happening next, I have to walk away and think for a while. I get quite anxious about what's going to happen next. So having a folder where I could go, oh my God, I've got to the end of the scene. What? Oh, I don't know what's happening next, and I would go, oh, okay, turn over the page. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I was planning to do, and it really helped me a lot actually. And so, you know, I think I did 6 drafts of that book before I sent it off. And so with the second book, I tried to do that. I tried to do that from the outset, plot it out from the beginning. Not so much with the scene by scene outline, but even just have a much clearer structure. And that didn't work. You know, it does come back to this thing of what others are saying, that you're kind of finding the way with the story. So I wrote 30,000 words and again stopped and threw that out. And so I had this more, for me, I guess it was like, okay, I'm driving, you know, I'm going to do a 1,000-kilometer drive. And I know that, you know, after 3 hours, I want to stop here. And after another 5 hours, I'm going to stop there. But really, that was as much as it was, you know, that was as much as my outline was. And actually, it was more like, I'm going to do a 1,000-kilometer drive. And I don't really know where I'm going to end up at the end. You know? So yeah, it's... I love the way that I can have an idea about something, but it does change, you know, like, as I say, it went from a literary, first one went to what I thought would be a literary drama to a crime story, you know, fast-paced crime story. And then in this one, it's, you know, in the first draft, the main character said something at a complete throwaway line about maybe taking part in a bodybuilding contest one day, and then now he's actually decided in the subsequent drafts he is actually doing that. It's like it suddenly became a huge, great part of this, actually a massive part of the story. It's changed it completely. It's almost what the crime is about. It is actually what the crime is about. So yeah, things just spark in my head while I'm writing. So yeah, it's a bit like having a map and then turning it this way, turning it that way, and turning it that way, throwing it out and getting a different map and drawing my own map. And yeah, it sounds really messy, but it is a bit messy actually. But yeah, that's kind of my process. I don't know how it's going to evolve for the next story. The next story will be, in my head, it will be, this is what I'm going to write, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and then that will get thrown out again as well. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Nigel. I am delighted that you mentioned that your literary drama turned into crime fiction, because I have had that happen so many times. So I'd like to ask the rest of our panel, have you ever been surprised by your writing? Like, what is something that you did not expect to happen that did happen?
I've definitely been surprised by random genres popping up that I didn't expect to. So I sympathize, Nigel, that your book turned itself into a crime story. When I was writing Skunk's Dance, I was expecting to set it entirely in the present, and it was going to open with like a prologue set in the Old West. But I liked the Old West character too much, and I couldn't let him go. So I wound up writing half the book as a Western, as, you know, sort of flashbacks to the 1860s. Because it's what entertained me, you know. It was too good a character who was too funny to leave behind. I've also been randomly surprised by things turning into crime fiction as well, which is, and neither of those things is probably a good idea, because I don't like Westerns and I don't really read any crime fiction. So I'd be kind of curious to hear how other panelists deal with the novel going in a direction that you don't have much experience with. Like, Nigel, you said you didn't read crime fiction. How do you write a crime story if you don't read crime fiction?
That is an excellent question. Thank you, St. John.
I started reading a lot of crime fiction after that over the coming few years. I'm a slow writer anyway, so it wasn't like I had to read it in 3 months. It was a long process for me. So yeah, I got familiar with the genre very quickly. And discovered I loved it, actually, and discovered that for a long time it became the only thing that I read, really. Yeah.
I think for me, I've mentioned before with my dystopian tale, one of the characters just wanted a bigger part. But one thing that, and it surprised me that because like I said, that was the first time I was sort of panstering. I wasn't comfortable in the dystopian genre. I was reading a couple of famous dystopian books at the time to get my head around it. But what it did, it meant that the other character, because she wanted to be the girlfriend of one of my main characters, it actually watered down this other main character because it's social media central, set in the future, and a lot of main characters are social influencers. It meant that my love blogger, Sean, suddenly had a girlfriend, and everything I wanted to say about the human relationship side of things went out the window because it is a book about a society totally ruled by social media, and people are doing things like having mirror meals rather than going out to dinner. They both cook the same thing and they sit like this and talk over while they're eating the same dish without actually going to each other's places and stuff like that. So to actually lose what I wanted Sean to represent, the actual about human interaction and about, you know, love and one night stands and making love suddenly disappeared. And I kind of regret that happened, but I'm glad this certain character who owned a bookshop where there was hardly any books in there and less books because people were more interested in social media, that she became a much more interesting character. So I think give and take for me when things change.
I find that when I start writing a book, I have a vision for the book of how I want it to be and what I want it to make people feel. And I have never once wound up with a finished product that matched that vision. Does this sound familiar to anyone?
I do find the theme kind of evolves organically. I don't set out to write a book about, you know, the hazards of social media or you know, the value of friendship or, you know, motherhood or whatever your theme is. I never write that from the start. I just write what's a good story, and what the characters go through will sort of determine the theme by the end of it, and then you can sort of go back in the edit and tidy things up a bit.
We would be in so much trouble without editing.
Oh God, how did they do it back in the old days? You know, Jane Austen. What did she just write it all by hand and then send it to the publisher?
This is the amazing thing about Jane Austen. She did not have her own room. She lived with her family and she hated people seeing her write. So she used to get up in the morning. Her responsibility was to give the servants kind of their daily instructions. And then she would go into the sitting room where they entertained their guests, and she would have, I think, either her knitting or the darning, just something there, and she would write. And she had a couple of hours before the rest of the family woke up. And as soon as they did, and as soon as they came into the sitting room, or if they had any visitors, she would hide the writing. She would not refer to it. But in the evening, when there were no guests, no outsiders in the family home, she would read it aloud to her family. So no one was ever allowed to see her write.
I just want to say, even with the way I plot things, sometimes like I'll just have a couple of notes in a chapter. This has to happen to move the story forward, but I let my imagination take me anywhere. Throw in extra characters, throw in different ideas. But as long as those things happen in that chapter, I know the story's going to continue. And I think that's where I let my imagination let loose, where I kind of pantser within my set of rules that this character must do this, that must happen, and that's the cliffhanger at the end of the chapter. But I let myself be imaginative while I'm writing that chapter.
Yeah.
Another author told me. Oh, sorry, Anne, go ahead.
That's right. Sorry, I'm doing a lot of what Kevin's doing. I mean, I'll plan it out, but it's more it's so much, it's more A to C and then what happens in the middle. Like when I was writing one book, I basically, on the outline for the chapter said they get attacked by weird shit. That was it for the whole chapter. So yeah, when I say our plot, it's quite loose in places.
I've actually got a quick question for you, Anne. You've mentioned that you co-write with both Elizabeth, who's here in the chat. Hi, Elizabeth. And with Lou. Have you ever been thrown a curveball by one of your co-writers or caught by surprise that way? And you don't have to tell us which co-writer if you don't want to.
Occasionally, but it's been more, hey, I was writing this and then the character went this way by one of my co-authors. And that was fun. And I've done the same thing back in return, and then we had to replot some of it because it didn't quite work. But that's half the fun of it. And I love writing with other people because you can hit ideas backwards and forwards, and it's quite fun writing somebody else's characters as well. And you get to know them really well. And then I just love that they're writing my characters. It's quite fun.
Yep, I live for the day that somebody writes fanfic about my books. Gary, you mentioned that your first draft of The Boy from the Mish changed a lot in the editing process. Were there any surprises in the editing process that really surprised you?
Yeah, I guess I did a lot of self-editing before I submitted to anywhere. But yeah, I think I originally set out just to write this gay love story between these two Aboriginal teens. That was the story, that was the idea. But what I didn't realize and what surprised me was that I was writing a story that was also about racism. It was also about growing up in a small country town. It was about homophobia. It was about struggling with your sexual identity and that journey it takes to accept who you are. And really, at its heart now, it's a story about being Aboriginal and growing up Aboriginal in Australia. And yeah, so that surprised me that I didn't realize at first that the book was saying a lot more than I originally intended. And I think it's a much better book for it. So I'm thankful for that. But yeah, it was the same with like this other project I've been working on. I'm writing just uh, this one central story, and then it turns out that I've been, seeding all these other things to say a lot more, and it's a really a bigger story, and it has layers. So yeah, so that's what surprised me there. And yeah, like in the editing process, bringing out those secondary characters and those other character arcs, and while it's my main character's name is Jackson in this book, and it's really Jackson's story, but it's also about his friends, it's also about his mum. Yeah, and yeah, that's what's really surprised me through that whole process of you know originally it was just figuring out the structure, making it a more coherent structure. I was pretty all over the place in those early drafts, but yeah, it really turned into something else, I think.
That sounds just really cool. I'm so glad you had that experience, and I'm even more excited to read The Boy from the Mish now. So thank you. Impostor syndrome. It is something that I think pretty much every writer that I know deals with. I can see Kevin nodding. So, Kevin grimacing. You're still muted, Kevin. But
yeah. Look. I think sometimes you just need a reality check and to pat yourself on the back. Like for me, if it happens to me, I think, okay, I've had some people who've written some lovely reviews about my work. I'm with a small publisher, and all those sales with a small publisher aren't big. I've actually got a small publisher that, I have editors, I have book cover art, So, ideally, I think to myself, well, I'd like to leverage that. I'd really like to get one book published by a larger publisher so people can also discover my back catalogue. And I think that's the thing, you can't dote on what makes the glass half empty. You got to think, I've actually achieved this. And I know it's hard. I think as creative people, because we're kind of, soft-hearted, we tend to turn on ourselves rather than turn on anything around us, if that makes any sense to anyone. So we take it all on board, but, in a way, it's better to have that than being, a total narcissist like Trump or something, and being on the other edge of the spectrum where you just think, scratching your nose is a brilliant piece of work. How does everyone else feel?
I really like your suggestion there of sort of like remembering your good reviews. One of the most sort of empowering things I did was I was preparing for a book fair, and I had a wall behind me so I was taking some covers and printing out some reviews to kind of display on that wall and give me a bit of credibility. But actually selecting those reviews, printing them, making them real, kind of, I don't know, they just sort of felt realer to me than they had before. And so it was a really good reminder to me that people enjoy what I write. And
I'm just going to add something else in. I'm someone who doesn't go back and read my own work, because I have this thing about a lot of my work is personal and it's something I'm trying to say about something. So once I've dealt with that, I don't read it. But sometimes to deal with imposter syndrome, I'll just pick up one of my books, open at a random page and just read a page and then close it. And I just go, actually, that's not bad. That's good. And that comforts me as well.
It sounds kind of bad because I write comedy, but I will forget the jokes that I've written. And if I go back and read something that I wrote a year ago and laugh at the joke, then that's a really encouraging. I know you shouldn't laugh at your own jokes, but it is one of the most encouraging signs you can have that you've done something that's actually funny and worthwhile. I get the imposter syndrome a hell of a lot. And like you said, someone else said, I think it was you, Kevin, we are our own worst critics, which is a good thing. Like last year I was working on a novel and it came up short. It was 50-something thousand words. And I sent it to some test readers saying, look, something's missing, but where is it? I don't know what it is. And one of them told me, and I thought, I can't write that. Like, I'm not that kind of writer. I don't think I'm physically capable of telling that story. But I pushed myself to do it and wound up doing it, and it made it a lot better. And I think it made me a better writer. So I think if you experience that imposter syndrome, it's an indication that you are doing something new and pushing yourself. So it's a good sign in a way. It feels awful, but it means that you're not stuck in a rut just churning out the same formulaic crap novel after novel.
I'd like to say here with that sort of thing, the importance of having a good community, because when you're having days like, times like that, they're the people who can get behind you and you can support each other. Hey, you're doing a good job, and hey, your stuff's really good, and then you can help each other out. So I think finding a good community and a support network is really important. And as for the sort of performance thing, having been a musician for years and years, I've always heard the thing, and I think it's quite true, that if you go into a performance feeling too confident, that's not a good thing. I think not being 100% sure is actually a good sign that you are a good writer or you are a good performer. It's the whole pride goeth before a fall idea as well.
So I'm just going to say, I studied acting, and it's the same thing. If you don't have the stage fright before you go on and you're too confident, then you think your performance is fantastic. Just look at some of the drag queens on RuPaul's Drag Race who are Instagram stars. So they got all these likes, but they fall apart when they're actually, living the real world and being criticised. If you don't have that, it's what pushes you. It's what pushes you to be better, and we all learn from that. We'll become better people. That which doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
Yeah, or you could be like Gillian, who did 6 panels today and was like, yeah, I've got this. I don't need to panic, and then tripped over my tongue introducing us. So yeah, nervousness, perhaps it is a good thing. Nigel.
I was just going to say, I really agree with St. John about, when you were talking about looking back at seeing your jokes and laughing at them. I was looking at King of the Road for the next panel I'm on, which, where I need to pick a reading from it. And I haven't looked at it for ages. And, I've been going through a period recently where I've really hated my writing. I've actually hated writing. I've felt like, I should give up. It's not going anywhere. I'm not very good. It's too much stress. I've got a full-time job, and it's too much stress on top of that. Lots of negative talk. And then, it's gradually coming together now, and I've coming out of that feeling. But when I went, it was actually a really, really good exercise to go back and flick through this and look for bits. A book that's been through lots of drafts, then an editing process, and it's been published. And I was saying to my partner, "Oh, this book's really good." And it was really sort of affirming to see that, when I go through that process of writing a first draft, which is terrible, and then layering and layering and layering and cutting bits out and putting things in and layering and layering and layering, and then having another person to help me edit it, it does polish up, and it's like, okay, I might be feeling like the world's worst writer at the moment, but it's really just in my head. I have to just keep reminding myself it's just in my head. I don't know what this second book will turn out like, but it will turn out better than I'm imagining in my head. I can guarantee that.
And Nigel's King of the Road is a good book. I've read it.
Thank you.
So Gary, I think
Yeah, I was just gonna say, So like I've done, I did Sydney Writers Festival last weekend. I just did Brisbane Writers Festival, and I talked a lot about, the worry, because I've had a lot of great feedback from this book. I've received a lot of messages from older gay men, which is really surprising, who've really loved it. And so talking to all these people at these places and talking with other writers, my biggest worry was that I wasn't going to write anything that was as good or that people would like as much as this one, or I've already hit that lightning moment, and now it's anything I write now is just going to be mediocre. But yeah, like meeting other writers in these places, I've met a lot of people on Twitter and Instagram and like become friends, and yeah, so I think having that, that being able to talk to other writers and become friendly and ask for advice and those sort of things is all really helpful. But yeah, I've definitely started working on another manuscript and got a few thousand words in and thought, oh no, this isn't as good. Like I should just stop now because it's not going to be as good as The Boyfriend is. But yeah, that's sort of my experience with it is trying to let myself accept that that book is that book, and whatever I write next, it's going to be different, and that's okay. And as long as as long as I'm writing stories about characters that I really care about, and that have great journeys in the story, and characters that a reader can empathize with. I think that's all I really want to do. So I'm slowly learning to let go of the boy from the Mish to, know that I don't have to let that pressure of following that up hold me back. But yeah, it's been really. I've definitely had a lot of moments where I've thought that what I'm writing now isn't as good as that, or yeah, it's just not going to be received as well.
I really like what you said about as long as you're writing about the characters that really matter. That's just so important because writing is pretty hard work. And it's so important to have to be telling, the stories that really mean something, and that's what keeps you going on this journey. There is so much more that I would love to talk to you all about, but we have to start wrapping things up. So following this, we have romance readings hosted by Marvin. And we've also got queer contemporary readings hosted by Kevin and featuring Nigel. So that's something to look forward to. If you want to keep this conversation going, please hop over to the Discord channel and you can ask the panelists more questions there, share your thoughts. We'd love to hear them. But before we go, could everyone just tell people who want to keep up with you and learn more about you where the best place to find you on the internet is?
I'll start. That's my surname. Remember it, write it down now. kevinclair.com. You'll find everything you need to know about me there. Or if you find me on Twitter, again, @KevinClair, there's a Linktree link in my profile information that sends you over to my YouTube and everything else. So that's me.
If you sort of, I've got my info on the site as well, and I've also got a Facebook readers group called Anne's Books and Brews. That's a good place to keep up with me too. I think that info's on the site as well. Yeah.
So I do have a website called nigelbartlett.com.au, but the easiest way is Instagram for me, which is simply Nigel Writer. So it's Nigel Writer on Instagram.
Yeah, and I've got a website as well, GaryLunsborough.com. But I'm also very active on Instagram and Twitter. So Instagram is Gary Lunsborough, just like that, no spaces. And Twitter is G Lunsborough. But I also blog occasionally on my website. So
I don't do social media, but I do have a blog. My website is stjo.hn. I managed to snag I think it's Honduras top-level domain name is .hn, but don't tell them in case they take it away because I don't live there.
That is very clever. Well done, you. So does that leave Nigel, or am I just crazy?
Everyone's said it.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't register Nigel. I'm sorry, Nigel.
Okay, don't worry.
Well, thank you again. This has been an absolute blast. I highly recommend that you go and listen to Kevin and Nigel on the Queer Contemporary Readings and follow our authors. And yeah, just thanks again. It has been fantastic. I will see you soon.
Thanks so much. It's been a real thrill.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.